This all happened when I was 19. Not the best looking dude, so I've never had much luck with women, and I ended up on Tinder. I wasn't having much luck on there either until like the third month of using it, when a blonde woman named Katie messaged me. She was pretty enough that I just dismissed her as a bot. It wasn't until 3 days later that she messaged me again, which was odd because bots almost never message more than once. I clicked on her chat and replied, then looked at her profile. What I saw was pretty generic, but definitely wasn't a bot's profile. We'd been talking for like a month when she proposed the idea that I come see her. I was pretty reluctant as she lived nearly 8 hours from me by car. But I had to admit, I really did like her quite a bit, and I had been thinking about asking her if I could come see her for a while now. After a bit more badgering from her, I finally said that I would take the drive to see her. At this point, I had no reason to doubt that she was who she said she was. We had video chatted almost every other week, and called most days, so I assumed I'd just gotten really lucky. Things did get a little weird on the way there though. She kept messaging me, asking me where I was, and making sure I was still coming. At some point, when I took more than 30 minutes to respond, she sent me a slew of annoying texts. Admittedly, I had chalked all this up to her being nervous about me coming to see her. I was pretty nervous too, so I couldn't really blame her. I had a hard time finding the house at first. The directions she gave me were pretty confusing, and it was back through a series of gravel and dirt roads, and a large thicket of trees. It was still about midday when I came into an old-looking house. A window on the second floor was boarded up, but it didn't look abandoned, just worse for wear. Katie's red buggy that she talked about was parked in the front of the garage. I took out my phone and texted her that I was here. She only sent a smiley face in return. When I got out of my car to go knock on the door, I noticed someone was looking at me from one of the second floor windows. I found it a little creepy, but figured it was just her father or something. She had told me that he comes to stay with her every now and again, so I ignored it and knocked on her door. She answered with a smile and even gave me a kiss, which really surprised me as I followed her inside. We sat down on her couch and started talking about her plans, when I asked her about her dad. "You didn't tell me your dad was here," I said. "Was that going to be a surprise, or?" Katie looked confused, and she told me that her dad wasn't here. I still thought she was keeping up the act, and I told her that she didn't have to keep pretending, and that I'd seen him looking at me through the upstairs window. Katie went pale and said we had to get out of here now. We both ran to our cars, and when I questioned Katie, she informed me that her dad was not there, and that she'd been home alone all day until I showed up. I called the police, and while I was on the phone giving the address, Katie gasped and pointed to the window where I'd seen the guy last. He was looking at us from that same window again. Now I got a better look at him, and he seemed older and frail, almost like he hadn't eaten anything in a while. He left the window after he saw what we had saw him. The police took half an hour to show up, and the whole time Katie was crying and mumbling about how she was an idiot for not keeping her doors locked. When the police finally did show up, one started asking me and Katie questions, and the other two searched the house. They came back out a little later and told me and Katie that while they didn't find anyone, they did find that the back door was hanging open. Whoever it was had ran out into the woods, but the cops were sure the house was empty. After the cops left, Katie asked me to stay the night because she was too scared to be in the house by herself right now. I gladly did, and we slept downstairs on the couch, as Katie's bed was in the room next to the one the man had been in. Katie had also brought out the shotgun that her father had given her, but she had never used. I told her it was fine, the man's gone, but she insisted, saying she'd feel safer if we had it out, and I'm glad she did. Later that night, I was still wide awake, watching TV. Katie had somehow managed to fall asleep. From the kitchen, I heard the sound of the doorknob being turned. At this point, I wasn't even scared, I was just pissed. I flipped on the light in the kitchen and pointed the gun at the kitchen door, and there he was. The guy had been in the house before was standing on the other side of the glass door. He looked shocked, and I'm glad we had locked the door. The man unfroze and yet again ran into the woods. I woke up Katie and told her what happened and called the police yet again. When they arrived, they did a sweep of the woods and found no one. They told Katie and me that it would probably be a good idea to stay somewhere else for the night. Me and Katie said our goodbyes, and she was going to stay at her friend's house and I was going home. I left a little after Katie did, and I was on the phone with my brother telling him about what had happened. My headlights were on. As I was talking, something caught my eye. That fucking man was standing at the corner of the house just watching me. I gunned it out of there and didn't even bother calling the police again, but I did text Katie and said she was going to call them again. I don't think Katie ever went back to that house alone.
Hey everyone, we truly appreciate your support. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel for more upcoming stories and exciting content.
So I'd just gotten out of a pretty significant relationship with someone of 4 years. Nearly engaged and moving in together, when things fell apart. It took a good amount of time to be back on my own and get my shit together. When my friends began encouraging me to get back out there. Needless to say, I wasn't really wanting anything at that point, nor looking for anything. But they insisted that I at least go check out and go on a few casual dates for practice, just to kind of get my skills back together, so to speak. I think they were all just kind of concerned because I'd become quite a hermit. So I matched with this girl who's home from college for the summer. She was a little out of the way from me, but I was eager to meet her, and she seemed really interested as well, and was even willing to come to my area to meet. I really wasn't that interested, to be truthful, but my friends again encouraged this. You know, practice, whatever the hell that means. A date doesn't mean commitment. Whatever. I want to be very clear though. I was honest and explicit with her from the very beginning that I was not looking for anything serious, or really anything at all. I was very forthcoming that I'd gotten out of something serious and was just kind of encouraged to explore. She persisted and still wanted to meet me, so we agreed to a casual lunch in a sports bar that week. So I get there. She was already waiting for me. I was a bit put off by how much different she looked in her pictures. I'm not trying to sound shallow or anything, but her pics from Tinder easily had to be at least 5 years old, which I verified based off of the tattoo she had in person versus the one she didn't have in pics. So I was a bit thrown off by that. I wasn't the least bit attracted to her, but I was there to just have new experiences anyway, right? No big deal. I felt so bad because the entire time she seemed incredibly shy and awkward. I even noticed her hand shaking when she reached for her glass, which I actually found endearing, honestly. So I did my best to get her talking and tried to keep her feel more relaxed. I asked her questions and chatted about things you figure you chat about on dates like this. Where she grew up, music you're into, school you go to, what major are you in? All to which I literally received only one-worded answers. It went on like this for an hour. She was not working with me at all. But I tried to keep room in my heart because it was clear she was feeling anxious, and I understand that on a personal level. Then she pulls out a book and says, "I got this for you." And I responded gratefully, thanking her and inquiring what it was about, because hey, if someone wants to share a good read with me, I'm all for that. She looks at me funny and says in a very sudden but odd tone, "You're kidding, right?" I'm very confused. I just kind of look at her like, what? And she says, "This is your favorite book. You told me this was your favorite book." To which I said, "No, I have never heard of this before." So we concluded that she ultimately got me confused with someone else she must have been chatting with, which I honestly found hilarious. She was embarrassed, obviously, but I made light of it and said I found it funny, because I get it. That's Tinder culture, I guess. So as we finish lunch, I'm still receiving one-worded answers despite our funny moment. And I kind of become a bit suggestive that we should conclude our date by saying I had to get back to feed my animals and do some laundry. She became very adamant on spending more time together and asked if we could do something else. I was genuinely trying to be a decent person here, so I agreed. And we found a nearby park to walk in, and that's where the shit gets really weird. We sat on a park bench. Mind you, it's broad daylight. There's kids playing basketball nearby, folks jogging past us. I start making conversation yet again, but still getting that one-worded answer. Then seemingly out of nowhere, without any warning whatsoever, she proceeds to kiss me really aggressively, tongue and everything. I was honestly just so shocked that I just stood there frozen, not knowing what the hell to do. I had this timid, shy woman who's really not made much conversation with me at all, who was so nervous she was visibly shaking, just turned into a freaking bear mauling my face in like 0.6 seconds. My head was spinning with confusion and anxiety. and I swear it felt like it lasted forever, and I just prayed for it to stop. I was put off so bad, and honestly afraid to do or say anything. Like, what do you even do in that situation? I was hoping she picked up on my very obvious body language that I wasn't reciprocating anything whatsoever. I was completely unprepared for a situation like this. And then this really nasty, disgusting guy walks by, gawking and catcalling us. Literally began to proposition us into a three-way. And I'm just like, WTF is going on? I need to get out of here. I was 1,000 different types of uncomfortable. Thankfully, I ended up warding off the guy after telling him very politely, no, more than several times, all the while she's just laughing. And I'm thinking, who even are you? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde over here. So he leaves. And now I'm insisting that I need to leave as well and go home. She seems to ignore what I'm saying, gets very close to my face again and says, "Did you like that? Do you think I'm sexy? Do you want me?" When I tell you I was nervous, I was like, I really need to go home. And she was like, "Can I come?" And I told her very firmly, no. She literally tried to persuade me to let her come back to my place with me. And I had to say no more than 3 times. So finally I'm home and frankly just kind of shaken up. I hadn't really done the dating thing in quite a long time, but that felt abnormal. She texts me after she gets home and asks me out on a second date. I was still being very kind despite being made incredibly uncomfortable, and told her I thought she was a very cool chick and I had a nice time. Lie. But I did not feel anything there, and I reminded her that I wasn't looking for anything again. She text bombed me a bunch of crazy shit, saying how she didn't understand and was so confused, that she thought that I was so into her and that things went great. I did not respond to any of these messages because now she's continuing to cross boundaries, and I said what I needed to say, and I thought I was being very decent by at least being honest with her. The text continued. I figured they're gonna eventually stop because it was just a first date, right? How can someone be so upset over someone not reciprocating on a first date? They did not stop. By the text, you would have thought we just ended a 2-year relationship, and she began calling me, at which point I had to block her number. So, Nightmare Tinder girl, please, for the love of everything, let's never ever meet again.
I buy things on eBay here and there, and have been doing so for years. I like to collect things like sports memorabilia, and occasionally I bid on auctions. One time I saw this autographed football that was signed by one of my favorite players. It had 0 bids, and the starting bid was pretty low. I expected it to go way up, but I entered my maximum bid and then moved on, thinking maybe I had a shot at winning it. The auction still had several days left. Over the next few days, I actually forgot all about it. Then, I got a notification that I had won the auction and I could pay for the signed ball now. When I looked, I couldn't believe it. Not one single other person had bid on the ball, and I had won. I don't remember the exact price. I think it was maybe like $10, and was probably worth a lot more, maybe over $50. I was really excited and paid the money. The very next night, though, I was at home when my phone rang. During this time, I had a landline phone that I had for years. I did not recognize the number on the caller ID, so I didn't answer it. What followed shortly after was a message. A man's voice came onto my answering machine, and he said that he was trying to reach me and mentioned my name. He said that I had won his auction for the football, and unfortunately nobody else bid on it. Then he said that I was getting way too good of a deal, and it wasn't fair at all, but he was going to do me a favor and mail it anyways. He went on to say that he expects me to leave him a very good review after this. Now, this rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't like how he called me up on my personal phone to say this. I won his auction fair and square. If he didn't want the risk of somebody paying $10 for it, then he shouldn't have started the bidding so low. He knew the risks. I went on eBay and looked at some other listings of the same player's autograph on a football. They were going for a little over $50, so the guy lost out on about $40. It's not that big of a deal. Just 2 days later, I received the football in the mail. It was fast shipping because I guess the guy lived in the same state as me. After receiving the football, it was packaged well and just how it looked online. I went on eBay to leave the good review that the seller wanted so badly. To be honest, I really didn't want to leave him a good review after what he did. It kind of annoyed me. But when I logged into eBay, I noticed that he had already left me a negative review. On eBay, sellers and buyers can leave each other reviews. You can leave it positive, negative, or neutral. This affects your feedback, and people are less likely to buy or sell to you if you have a bad rating. Mine had been perfect to that point, and his was pretty good. I think it was like 99% positive. His negative review of me said, "Buyer got way too good of a deal." Clearly, he was upset about it, but I did not feel that it was fair for him to leave me a bad review. What was I supposed to do? I bid and I won. Did he expect me to offer to pay more for no reason? It angered me that he left me a bad review, so I left him a bad review. I said what happened. I said, "I won the auction from this seller for a good deal." He then called my home phone complaining and demanded that I leave him a good review. He sent me a message after this, which I ignored. I didn't even open it. Then, the next day, he called me again. I didn't answer, and he left another message. This one was very angry. He berated me for about 3 minutes straight. I didn't even listen to the whole thing and deleted it, but this didn't stop him. He called me again several times the next day. I got frustrated, and luckily I had call blocker installed on my landline. I blocked his number so that he would finally stop bothering me. For several days, everything was fine. But then, one night, I was at home, and out of nowhere got a knock on my front door. I walked down to the front door, but before opening it, looked outside. It was a man who I did not recognize. I didn't know why he would be here. I answered the door, and the man standing there mentioned my name and asked if that was me. I said yes. He then told me that he sold me a football on eBay not long ago. As soon as I heard that, I slammed the door right in his face. This caused him to start aggressively banging on my door. I yelled at him to go away or I was calling the cops. He was yelling and demanding that I give him the ball back, saying that I scammed him. I couldn't believe this guy. I'm not sure if he was really just mad about the ball at this point, or if he was just mad at me. He kept standing there and knocking on my door every so often. After he didn't leave for over 10 minutes, I called the police on him. When they arrived about 10 minutes after that, the man was still there. They spoke with him, and he gave his side of the story, which I'm not even sure what that was. An officer came inside and spoke to me, and said that the man outside kept claiming that I scammed him and stole his autographed football. I told the officer the whole story, and I showed him eBay proof on my phone. After a while, the police ruled in favor of me. They said that the transaction was fair and I owned the football. They told the man that he had to leave my property and told him not to come back. Eventually, the man agreed and left. After that, I never heard from him again. I still have the football, and every time I look at it, I laugh when I remember the crazy story that goes with it. Several months ago, I sold my PlayStation 5 on eBay. My friend was getting rid of his PS5 for an Xbox, so he sold it to me for a really good price. His PlayStation 5 was a little bit nicer than the version that I had, so I decided to sell mine. I listed it for a good price on eBay as a buy it now rather than an auction. Somebody bought it after just 2 days, and the very next day, I packaged it up really good and shipped it. I sent it to the address that was given from the eBay account that bought it from me. Now, 3 days after I shipped the PlayStation, and 4 days after it was sold, I got a message on eBay from the buyer. He told me that he recently moved and forgot to put his new address on his eBay account. Then he asked me that I ship it to his new address instead. I responded and told him that I already shipped the PlayStation several days ago and that it was too late. The guy freaked out, saying that I should give him a refund because he wasn't going to get it. I told him that he should have realized that, either before he bought it or within the first day. What was I supposed to do? Sit around waiting for his blessing for me to ship it? I mean, normally, people want things shipped as fast as possible after they buy it. He said that he was going to report me to eBay, but that didn't really scare me because I knew I had done nothing wrong. I told the guy that the package will have his name on it, so he should either go to his old address and pick it up, or contact whoever now lives there and ask them to send it to him. In my mind, that was a very logical solution. Obviously, if it was at the wrong address, there was a chance that somebody would steal it, but I mailed it in a box where it wasn't obvious that it was a PS5. The guy did not seem to think my ideas were good. He just told me that he needed a refund, and he kept threatening me, saying that he would have my eBay account banned. I told him that I wasn't going to refund him. Over the next few days, the guy kept harassing me, sending me messages. He kept saying that I had to give him a refund. He really wanted the money, but I wasn't going to give it to him. I just ignored him. So about a week later, I was looking at some of the messages that he sent me, and I decided to look him up, just for the heck of it. His username seemed to be his actual name. It was a first name, an underscore, and then a last name and a bunch of numbers. The last name was somewhat unique sounding, so I thought that I might be able to find him. I wanted to know what this guy looked like that was harassing me so much. I went onto Facebook and entered his name. Just one result came up, and it was a younger looking man. His page was public, so I could see everything that he posted and stuff, and he was quite active. I scrolled down just a little bit and saw a post that nearly blew my mind. He had posted a picture of a PlayStation 5 with the caption, "Just got this bad boy in the mail. Hit me up if you want to play some COD." The PlayStation looked just like the one that I had sold, and it was dated just 3 days after I had mailed the PlayStation, and the very same day that the guy told me that he had the wrong address. This guy was totally trying to scam me. It was a pretty bad attempt too, to be honest. I screenshotted the post and then sent it to him on eBay. The guy claimed that it wasn't him. Then he backtracked and said that it was his friend's PS5, not his. Then he backtracked again and called me a curse word. After that, I never heard from him again.
My name is Lisa, and I generally don't have a good history when it comes to relationships. I'm often told that I'm too clingy or that I come on too strong early on in the relationship. I'm very simple and I just want to be loved by someone who has similar interests as me, such as live music, days out, and just having day-to-day fun. A simple life. I've tried Tinder and plenty of fish, but I never seem to match with anyone who stays around for more than a date or two at the most, and I'm not exaggerating. I post a lot on social media, such as photos of me in new dresses, just in the hopes of getting some attention, and maybe one day someone will check me out and like what they see enough to have a third date. In today's age, a large majority of people meet through platforms like Instagram and Bumble, so I always tag my location and check into places, which isn't the smartest idea, I know. I don't have many followers, nor do I generally get many likes. It's usually about 5 or so likes per post, and that's usually off my closest friends or family. I'm at home one evening, just watching some trash TV, when I see a notification pop up on Instagram. You have 1 new follower. This is about as exciting as my night usually gets. I checked out the profile, but it just appears to be some kind of spam account. There were pictures, but they were all groups of friends, nothing to indicate who the actual account belonged to, so I just closed the app and went to bed as I was up for work in the morning. When I arose, I followed my usual morning routine, got dressed, had breakfast, and brushed my teeth. I made my way to work and noticed some notifications on Instagram. Johnny has liked your photo. Johnny has liked your photo. Johnny has liked your photo. Johnny had gone through my account and liked every single one of my photos. Now, this seemed a little strange, but I was flattered. I got a sense of butterflies and lust for someone that had liked me, so I decided to send a message. "Hey, I noticed you liked all my photos. Do I know you?" Johnny instantly saw my message and started replying. "No, you don't know me. I saw you check into the corporate bar and grill and really liked your style." Now I was really curious. I didn't even know what Johnny looked like. "How sweet," I replied. "Can I ask which one you are on your profile?" "Second on the left." He wasn't the one I was hoping it would be. He appeared a bit short for my liking, but was still relatively good looking. Height wasn't exactly a deal breaker for me. We were getting on really well at this point. Lots of compliments and flirting, and even some genuine laughing out loud. I was smitten with a guy I hadn't even met. After about 2 weeks, he asked me if we could meet up, and he would take me to dinner at the corporate, as he was a regular there and they would look after us. Everything seemed perfect. No red flags or anything to suggest that things would turn out the way they did. As I was getting ready for our date, I was getting butterflies and decided to check on Johnny's profile when I noticed something that I had never noticed before. Johnny didn't follow any other account other than mine. Now, if you know anything about Instagram, you will agree that most people, as soon as they sign up for an account, will follow 10 to 20 people straight away. These are usually close friends, favorite teams, actors, bands, and so on. For him, to follow no one seemed very out of the ordinary. What seemed even more strange is that Johnny only had 2 followers. One was obviously me, but I was curious to know who the other belonged to. I went to check out the other profile, and what I found really disturbed me and made me feel sick to my stomach. It was a duplicate account of my own, like an exact replica. Every picture from my profile in the exact same order, with the exact same check-ins. I noticed the color ring around the profile picture that tells you the account has posted a story, and as any normal person would do, I decided to check what they had posted. It was me. Like, not shared pictures of me, but actual pictures of me taken in third person. There were photos of me going to work, photos of me at work, and everything else I had done that day. As I got to the last story, I saw that it was a picture of my front door, and it was uploaded just 3 minutes ago. This person was outside my house. I tried to tell myself that maybe they took the picture yesterday, or maybe it was just a friend playing a joke, but I couldn't be sure, and it certainly didn't feel like a joke. I messaged Johnny to say that I couldn't make our date and said we would rearrange. Johnny never replied. I went to stay at a friend's house that night just in case whoever it was decided to come and visit me in my sleep. I went to check on Johnny's account later that night, and it was closed along with my fake account. This was a sigh of relief, as I didn't have to break it off with Johnny and make things awkward by giving the opportunity for him to ask questions. My friend reassured me I would be safe there, and after checking the doors and windows what seemed like 100 times, we eventually went to sleep. I woke to a loud scream, and my friend grabbing my arm. As I sat up and looked, there was a man standing in the doorway to the bedroom. We couldn't really see his face, just the silhouette of a man. I was literally speechless. I was too scared to even scream. The man stood forward into the light, smiled, and then just turned around and walked away. We called the police and they came to check the house. There were no signs of forced entry. There was no broken glass. I know we checked all the doors and windows, which could only mean one thing. If it was Johnny, he was already in the house before we went to sleep. I moved back in with my parents after that, and I still live there now. I'm not sure if I could ever live alone again.
I live in a major city, born and raised here. I'm very familiar with my surroundings. I'm also aware to the fact that my city is one of the worst hubs for human trafficking, and living here can be very, very dangerous. Despite all this, I have taken pride in knowing that I do everything I can to remain as safe as possible. I've had close calls before, Shady landlord gave a stranger copies of my key, and a man tried to enter as soon as I was alone, and other horrifying tales, and considered myself an avid murderino. I'm pretty prepped. At the time, I had 2 things of pepper spray, one in my favorite jacket pocket, one velcroed to my desk at work. I also had 2 trusty pocket knives, one always on me, one in my car door pocket. Oh, my taser never leaves my bag also. I avoid shady situations, and despite being a small lady, I know my stuff. Yay for self-defense classes. My point is, I'm a very paranoid small chihuahua, and I still got into a scary situation. It is summer, and hot out. I've got a date with my favorite gal pal, and I swing by her place to pick her up. She tells me she has a job interview to go to first, and I agree to go with her. No big deal. She's a sweet tiny thing from a small town in the Midwest and very new to the city life and the wild things that can happen here. As we drive into a different city, I ask her about the job. It's a modeling gig. Oh, cool. For who? I found an ad on Craigslist. It's just sport clothes. The Craigslist thing sets a small, distant alarm off in my head, but I push it to the side. Where the heck are we going anyway? When we pull up to a Starbucks a bit outside of the city, the alarm in my head becomes a little less faint. Relax, I tell myself. I've gone to legit job interviews at coffee shops before. There's always been a good reason. We arrive first, late still, but end up waiting about 15 minutes. Kinda weird, but Kat's relieved we're not the rude ones when she gets a text saying he's here. I look around the Starbucks and outside at the parking lot trying to figure out who the mystery man can be when I notice a tall, well-dressed man step out of a black SUV. He smiles at us as he approaches, and I figured that's our guy. I could have sworn that SUV had been parked there for a while. I ask Kat if she wants me to step in line and grab her a drink, but she practically begs me to stay with her. Okay, I can do that. I didn't think it looked very professional, but I don't protest. The man, named Jack, leads us to an isolated table outside and doesn't say much about my presence, other than it was okay for me to be there. I get on my phone and shoot a text to my fiancé explaining where I was and what I was doing. He shoots back a "be careful," and I sit pretty to watch the show. Jack had this strange accent that I couldn't quite place my finger on. Looking back, I'm not even sure if it was real. He starts asking Kat the usual questions, and I notice she's absolutely bombing the interview. She doesn't have much experience and didn't bother to bring a portfolio, but despite this, he doesn't seem to care. The alarm in my head isn't much louder than a whisper, but it completely blares when he asks if she'd be comfortable doing lingerie shoots as well. Dear, sweet Kat says she doesn't have an issue with that, but would prefer to mostly do sports clothing like they had discussed earlier. She asks to see some of his work, and he pulls up a lingerie Instagram. All lingerie, no clothing at all. He holds it in front of her face and pulls it away immediately, and when she's asked if there would be more she'd be doing, Jack goes, "That was it," and hurries the conversation along. He says we need to go right now to his studio at a place he briefly mentioned the name of to sign papers and get everything squared away. It has to be done today. He's not working tomorrow, and his coworkers won't do it right. I absolutely hate everything about this, and I'm trying to glare some sense into her, but nothing is getting through. Kat agrees, and he turns his attention to me. "Do you want to be a part of this too?" I immediately know that nothing about this is professional. I look down at my beat-up docs and green cargo pants, a shirt that has flames and a slightly edgy logo on it, and can't help but scoff. That's not really my thing. I'm just the ride. He studies me for a second and then says we can all ride with him, directing his attention to Kat. "No, I don't want to leave my car. We'll follow you." He looks offended that I butt in, but asks where we parked. "Right in the front of the store. I got it." I pulled Kat to the Jeep and make sure we walk behind him. As soon as we get into the car, I lock the doors and try to keep from freaking out. We're not going. This doesn't feel right. What about the lingerie? Everything I say, she has an excuse for. We pull out of the parking lot, and I follow Jack's SUV, but the whole time I'm trying to figure out how to get out of this. Kat doesn't like the lingerie, but this could be a door for her, and she desperately needs the money. What if it is legit? He was alone anyways. You have your knife and spray, right? Of course I do, but I'm 5'2" to this man's 6'3", and Jack could very much have friends, and I don't want to possibly hurt or end up hurt or worse. I realize at this point that Kat is insane. We drive along as I try to talk to her, and we start driving out into the desert, the middle of absolute nowhere. There's a divider in the road that prevents U-turns, and I get an eerie feeling that Jack knew to take us this way. I'm absolutely desperate at this point. I pull out my phone and snap a picture of Jack's SUV license plate. I upload it to Snapchat where friends can see it. Kat starts getting uncomfortable when she realizes how far we've driven. The name of the place he mentioned springs back into my head, and I know it's familiar from somewhere. A commercial jingle that's distinct but catchy. It's a restaurant or a hotel or something. He wouldn't have a studio there. Just please look it up. So she does. It's a casino. Unless this man has rented out a space, he wouldn't have a studio there. It's not consistent with the information he gave us at all. Kat is freaked out at this point. I tell her that this isn't uncommon and he was trying to confuse us the entire time. Throughout the entire interview, she had a confused and hesitant look on her face, like this wasn't what she was promised or expecting at all. Kat finally agrees that we need to get out of there, and I start to breathe easy again. I notice that every 5 minutes or so there's a break in the medians. It's a rough, quick stop and turnaround, but it'll have to do. So I do, and we absolutely gun it. Kat gets a call from Jack, and at first she ignores it. I convince her to call back, and she gets nothing at all, like the number had blocked her. It didn't go through. I tell her to screenshot the Craigslist ad, but she can't find it anywhere. It's like every trace of Jack disappeared. We go back to her apartment. I tell her she needs to report it. She promises she will, but later because she doesn't want her husband to know. He didn't even know she had this interview to begin with, and she didn't want him to know what happened. If I hadn't driven her, she would have gone alone, without telling a soul, and who knows what could have happened. I tried not to scold her too badly, but I just reminded her that our city was very different and much more dangerous than where she's from. Sweet Kat, I hope you're a little more awakened to the world, and I'm sorry for that. It's been a few months since we split ways, and I'm still worried to death over all the oblivious, crazy things you get into. Since the incident, I now have 3 pepper sprays, 1 for the car, and a new pocket knife to carry around. Thanks, Dad. She's gorgeous. I'm almost 4 months pregnant and now finally ready to get out of this dangerous city. Please, 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 my dear friends, be safe out there. It's such a scary world, and be incredibly careful with Craigslist.
This happened about 15 years ago. At the time, I was dating around and had a few creepy encounters during this. But this guy took the cake. He was an acquaintance my brother had met at a bar a few times, and was showing around the local area because he was new to the country. My brother set us up because he was apparently desperate for a girlfriend, and I guess I was pretty desperate too, because we ended up going on a date together. This date was probably the worst date I've ever been on. I showed up to the restaurant we were meeting at, and he was late, which isn't really that big of a deal, so I let it slip, and we went to sit down. To be honest, I knew from the start I wasn't attracted to this guy, but I thought I would just be polite and see if we had a nice night. He started off politely too. He held the door for me, pulled my seat out, all of that stuff. It wasn't really necessary, but it was a nice gesture. Then, when we were sitting down waiting for someone to come and take our order, I was reading the menu and he started talking about how much his fiancé would have liked this place. That took me by surprise, and I naturally asked about his fiancé. He revealed that he had a fiancé before moving over here, but he had just left her to move to another country. So I asked why they had broken up, and he said they never really technically broke up as such, but he got fed up with her nagging him about various things and just moved away. I didn't really know what to say after that, so I changed the subject and started asking him more about himself and where he used to live. he wasn't really very forthcoming. Finally, our waiter came over and started asking us what we were going to order. To clarify for the next part, our waiter was a man of color and he had an unusual accent for that area. So my date just stares blankly at him for a while, then turns to me and says, "You understand this guy?" And I said yes, I could easily understand him, before telling him our orders. After our waiter left, this guy continued to shock me. He said, "I wouldn't normally leave ordering to the lady, but that guy talked weirdly and I didn't get it." Wow. Way to tell me you're a racist and a sexist in one breath, dude. Again, I was speechless for a few moments before I ended up getting angry with him. I don't remember verbatim what I exactly said. It was just something along the lines of, "Well, I'm not a lady, so I can order for myself just fine, thanks. And why make racial remarks?" Then he got annoyed with me, told me he wasn't being racist, he just wasn't used to that kind of person where he was from. I pointed out that he wouldn't have met me if he just stuck to people he was used to be within his country. He did end up calming down after that and told me he wouldn't want that, because he's glad that he did meet me. Honestly, I found that a little weird, given that I didn't see any way to say that this date was going well, and he didn't know me very well, at all. But I decided that we had ordered, I should just stay, get my meal, and try to redeem the evening before I leave, and definitely never see this guy ever again. So I answered most of his questions about me, those basic getting to know me and small talk stuff for the most part. Then started on about my previous dates, if I was a virgin, whether I would be willing to wait until marriage, and then be submissive to my husband or not. It was at this point I realized that I was most likely on a date with a religious bigot, hence the misogyny, the weird attitude, the sexual stuff, and all his other closed-minded bullshit. So I settled for a "none of your business. Now, I need to leave." I checked the prices on the menu and left the money for my half of the food plus a tip on the table and got up to leave. He said he didn't see why I was being unreasonable with him, as though this had been a normal date, but then told me that I couldn't expect him to take my money, because that was an insult to him. Fine. You want to pay for my meal that's not getting eaten? Go ahead, pay for it. I'm not even going to be mad that you're spending your money on food that didn't get ate. So I took my money back and walked straight out. I just assumed that yes, this was an awful evening, but I would never have to see him again. I wasn't even back to my house when my brother started texting me, asking me where I was, because my date had called him in tears saying that I'd gone off for no reason, and he didn't know where I was or what to do. Thankfully, my brother was pretty calm about it and assumed that I'd left for some sort of reason. I explained everything to him, and he was pretty surprised too. After that night, we both tried to cut contact with this dude. My brother stopped meeting up with him, and we both blocked the Facebook account that we had for him too. My brother had to block his number too because he would not stop texting him about me, alternating between being really worried about me to saying he hoped I dropped dead. Then he started making endless different accounts on social media to harass us. He told my brother he didn't know why we weren't talking to him. He posted a bunch of weird posts describing me in detail before going on to call me a lot of horrible names. We continued to block them and moved on. The harassment got worse. He found me and followed me at some point, or got my address from a friend and then just turned up one day, standing around outside my house asking to come in and speak to me. When I refused to let him in, he grabbed my arm to prevent me from going in, and started to tell me that he didn't want to let me go because I would never find a man who loved me like he would, and that if I walked away from him again, I would regret it one day when I was old and lonely. He went on and on like this for ages while I tried to pull my arm away from him, before I finally got fed up of this, yelled at him to get off me and leave me alone, and kicked him in the shin. He let go of my arm but cursed at me, and said I was being ungrateful to him. And I took my opportunity to run inside and lock my door. He started banging on my door, then trying to push it inward. I was getting both upset by this man and super fed up of his presence in my life. So I grabbed my phone and called the police, telling him that someone was trying to get into my house. I was told that someone would be here soon. But 20 to 30 minutes later, there was no sign of anyone or anything. I was getting really upset and nervous because he was still forcing himself into the door, and I thought the lock would break soon. So I called my brother who lived nearby. just because I knew he would come, even though I wasn't sure if he would be able to help much. About 15 minutes later, my brother turned up after a brief conversation that I didn't quite hear outside. He was gone off the door, and I waited a few minutes and then texted my brother to see what was going on and if we would be alright to look outside now. He didn't reply, and the next thing I heard was the police turning up. So I did go outside to see what was going on. Apparently, after my initial call, they had received another call from a neighbor saying there were two men fighting on my lawn. I guess this was my brother and the guy, since my brother looked out of breath and pretty shook up, and that guy wasn't around anymore. My brother explained to the police that he had tried to stop the man from getting into my house, and then the man had hit him. I told my side of the story, and some of the other neighbors were asked what they'd seen, and if they were able to tell them about his attempts to get inside. Plus, there was marks on the outer side of the door, where he had repeatedly tried to get inside. The police went to look for him, and a few weeks afterward, I was called and told they thought they had found him, but when they wanted me to look at the suspect, it definitely wasn't the same man. I never heard anything else, and I really don't know what happened to him. I never saw him again, so I'm probably safe after 15 years. Regardless, I don't ever want to see that guy again.
I buy things on eBay all the time. I've bought things from video games to phones and even computers. I've also sold a couple of items as well. This is something that took place just last year. My mom's birthday was coming up, and I wanted to get her a new phone because the one that she was using was old and slow. She uses an iPhone, and I think she had like a 7 or 8 or something. I was looking up newer ones and was trying really hard to find a great deal. I should have just paid a fair price and bought one from one of those companies that refurbish them. That way you know what you're getting and everything is handled professionally. But instead, I got carried away trying to get the best deal. I was constantly scouring the latest listings and auctions. I found one that was a really good deal. It was selling for about $100 less than I would expect to pay for the phone. It was still several $100s though. There were a few pictures of the phone in what appeared to be the person's house. In the listing, the seller said that it worked great, but they had gotten a different phone and no longer needed it. It seemed legit, and I looked at the seller and they didn't have any other items for sale, but did have a 99% rating. When I saw where the seller was located, I noticed that it was in a city very close to me, only like 30 minutes away. That meant it would probably only take like a day or two to ship. I decided to buy it and felt really good with the money that I would be saving. A couple of days later, and the phone arrived in the mail. As soon as I unboxed it though, I realized that I had been scammed. The phone that I received was not even close to what I bought. It was one of those cheap Android phones that you can get for like $40 at Walmart. I really couldn't believe it. I went onto eBay and compared what it said I bought versus what I received. I had gotten scammed badly. I contacted the seller, demanding an explanation. When I did, I got no response. After not hearing back from him, I contacted eBay and reported his profile as well. I now saw that he had another listing of the same phone that I bought. I left a negative review, warning anybody else and telling them what had happened. I hoped that nobody else would fall for his scam. After several days of trying to contact the seller and communicating with eBay, things finally got resolved. I was able to get a refund from my bank, and I was told that the account got suspended as well. I was able to buy my mom an actual iPhone for her birthday. I was still mad about what happened though, but not long after I found out the account had been banned, I think the same night or else the next one, it was late at night and I was literally in bed about to fall asleep. I was on my phone until I got tired. It was probably a little bit after midnight, and suddenly I heard a loud bang at the back of my house. During that time, I rented a smaller house, which I lived by myself in. I got up from my bed and walked to the doorway. The sound came from the back of my house on the other side. Then I heard it again. It was followed by another bang, which I could hear was from the kitchen window at the back of the house. My bedroom was at the front of the house, so it was a ways away, but I could still hear it very clearly because of how loud it was. Somebody was there. I heard whoever was there start hitting the window repeatedly. I didn't waste any time and went back inside my bedroom and locked the door behind me. Then I got my phone and called the police. I told them that it sounded like somebody was trying to break into my house. Shortly after, I heard glass breaking. They had succeeded in breaking in. I let the police know, and they said that some officers should arrive shortly. Then I heard more loud noises. This time, inside. It sounded like whoever was inside was just destroying things or hitting everything in sight. I heard glass breaking, chairs falling over, and other loud noises. This went on for about a minute straight, and then stopped. Things became very silent after. I heard a little bit of noise coming from the back of the house, as if somebody was walking. Then that stopped too, and everything was completely silent. I remained in my room until the police got there. When I came out of my room, I saw that everything in my kitchen had been all messed up. My back window was smashed, glass was all over the place, and lots of other things were on the floor. Several dishes and cups had been smashed. My table and chairs in the kitchen were all knocked over. Lots of things from the cabinet were on the floor, and I saw several dents in the cabinets and furniture. They basically just trashed my kitchen and left. I told the police everything that I could, and then they left. I stayed with my parents for the rest of the night, and the entire next week as well. My window got replaced, and I got some new furniture. I only lived in that house for a few months after, and I don't live there anymore. Since then, everything's been fine, but I never found out who did it. I truly believe that it was the person who scammed me on eBay. I think they were angry that I got their account taken down. If they were running that blatant of a scam, there's no telling what they could do. Plus, they knew my address from shipping me the phone, and I had seen that they lived not very far away from me. Luckily, I don't live there anymore. Hopefully, nobody else gets scammed.
Tinder is a funny place. Not as funny as in haha, but like strange, you know? People pretend to be so normal, but normal people don't need dating apps. Take me, for example. I was 29 years old and single for the first time since I was 11. Best believe I was fucked up. Me and my ex-wife got together when we were kids and finally had the balls to split up 17 years later. It wasn't what you would call healthy at all. People grow apart, especially if you get together before you've grown at all. You don't really think about it, but a lot of things change when you get divorced. Living alone is fucking weird. Even more so sleeping by yourself after years of company. But the hardest thing is trying to adapt to the ever-changing dating world. After some convincing from a friend, I decided to make a Tinder account. Why? I don't know. I had the perfect dad bod, scruffy beard, and pickup truck. Why would someone pick me out of a million profiles? I guess I spoke too soon because soon after, my inbox swarmed with messages. Apparently, I'm exactly what every woman wants, but one in particular stuck out. Fiery red hair with these dimples. Her profile said she was an addict of horror movies and photography. This stuck out because my ex-wife hated horror movies, and I have an undying passion for them. Honestly, in some ways, it was the main factor in our divorce. I'm sure my horror fans understand. So, I messaged her. 1-2, Freddy coming for you. Oh, I don't think I mentioned. My name is Freddy. So, I thought it would be funny, you know? The Freddy Krueger song. Anyways, she got the joke like I knew she would, and we just hit it off. After a few days, I got her number, and a week after that, we went on our first date. We had talked so much through text, I was afraid we wouldn't have anything to talk about in person, so I chose to take her to a movie. They also happened to be playing Lights Out, which looked and was fucking amazing. As the movie progressed, we slowly got more comfortable and close, especially at the part where the creepy demon woman was scratching on the floor. Jesus. It was around that time I decided to hold her hand. I just reached over and grabbed it. After a minute, I looked over at her to see her smiling. After returning a smile, I looked back towards the movie screen. Just then, a bright light flashes, blinding my peripheral and causing the theater to fill angry shouts. I look over, and she's sitting there with her phone up and takes another photo of us not giving a shit about all the people yelling. She turns to me wearing the same smile from a moment ago and says, "Our first time holding hands." Honestly, it did weird me out, but I just chopped it up to she's just crazy. But listen, all women are crazy. and it's just to what extent. You have to choose your crazy. My ex-wife would make fake social media accounts to get me to cheat on her with herself. This girl likes to take pictures. I can deal with that. The rest of the movie went fine. I purposely tried to avoid any dating milestones until it was over. I got her home, and it's time to say goodnight, and I think long and hard about my next move. Do I try to kiss her? I mean, she's gorgeous and was cool most of the night, but would our kiss just be interrupted by the flash of her camera? She stands there smiling at me, and I know what she's waiting for. That's when I look down and notice her phone in her hand. She is literally prepared to take this picture. I know, I stood there for an abnormal amount of time, but eventually, I go in for a kiss, and sure enough, I'm blinded once again by the flash of her phone. The kiss ends a bit flat after the interruption, and she giggles while saying, "Our first kiss," as she admires the photo. She tells me to text her and goes inside, leaving me completely speechless on her stoop. Well, what the fuck do I do now? I thought. Deciding such a flaw could be ignored, I continued to see her. After 2 weeks, her photo gallery had filled up with photos of things like our first car ride together, the first cuddle session, and first dinner date. But there were a lot of stranger things too, like the first time we looked at each other for even longer than 10 seconds, and a picture of the first time that I took our picture, which she made me take, so she could take that picture of me taking the picture. It was exhausting. Half of the time she'd take pictures for no reason. I would often catch her out of the corner of my eye just standing there waiting for me to turn so she could take a picture. I had enough. The day I decided to break it off with her, we had taken the subway downtown to go to the museum. You can only imagine how many fucking pictures she took in there. I planned to do it on the way home when we stopped on the platform. At least there would be people around in case this crazy girl tried to kill me. Unfortunately, I'd never get the chance. After having to wait and be the last people off, we rushed to slip through the closing door only to barely make it. That's when we realized her long red curls were stuck in the door. I desperately tried to free her as I pulled on her hair and pounded on the window begging for someone to help. The people on the train tried to pry the door open, but once the train started moving, she lost her footing and was dragged off the rest of the way, disappearing into the tunnel. I turned to the crowd that stared at the man who couldn't save the girl. As you can imagine, it fucked me up a little. I didn't want to be with her, but I definitely didn't want her to die. Even though we saw each other for a few weeks, I was only actually in her presence maybe 5 or 6 times. I definitely hadn't met her family, but still felt obligated to go to the funeral. I had no clue what to expect, but when I got there, it seemed like a perfectly normal viewing. A sign-in book, arranged flowered, the whole shebang. I stepped up to the casket to pay my respects. Of course, it was closed. She had been dragged away by a train. There's no way they could have it opened. My thought was interpreted by a blinding flash to my right. I turned to look out of reflex, and there she was, standing with her phone out. Her gorgeous red hair draped down her body that looked as though it had been priced back together like a jigsaw puzzle. Some pieces obviously misplaced. The camera flashed again, and she was gone. I'm not one of those people to believe in ghosts, but I also know that her death didn't affect me to the point that I'm going fucking crazy. Yes, we were dating, and yes, I didn't save her, but I did try, and it was in no way my fault, so forgive me for not being messed up over a situation where I tried my best, but just wasn't meant to succeed. The thing is, she never went away. I mean, there are times where I don't see her, but if anything important happens, she's right there to take a picture. The call I received about my new job, she was standing in the kitchen with her phone up before the phone ever rang, her body disfigured and gray. When I met my new wife, she was there as well. Also, on our first date, and even the first time we made love, she was right there in the corner, the flash becoming more and more normal. When my son was born, she was in the room taking the first photo. Even though we never get to see the photos, it's kind of like having our own family photographer. My wife can see the flash, but she can never see the mangled form just to the left of her, setting up the perfect shot. My son, on the other hand, usually notices her before I do. Even when he took his first steps, he was walking towards her. One thing I'm sure of, that had to be the perfect photo.